right, let's
Yeah.
move on. We got Solid State. I think a nice little off season. In terms of the draft, I like Jarris Walker. I think he's gonna be a nice fit for this team. Trey Jones was picked up. I think they needed a guard. They got Trey Jones. Um, Re-signed Gordon Hayward. Re-signed Kristaps Porzingis. Jimmy Butler was a loss, and I think a pretty significant one. Um, when you look at the lineup, when you look at the offseason, how do you feel about Solid State's chances of getting back to the playoffs? Go ahead, Killa.
Uh, Layoffs. I think they've got a formidable team. Um, I really like Bruce Brown's role this year. He's playing on a Pacers team that's going to play fast. He was paid big money. They've got a lot of shooting. He excels on defense as well as kind of creating offense and exploiting like mismatches. Trey Jones, a lot of folks are pretty high on him. I'm not one of those guys, but he's been, showing pretty good, on the Spurs, and he's got, you know, tons of talent, right? Especially with Wembyama now on the Spurs. Marcus Smart, he's gonna he's gonna profit, right? Like for the first couple of months, a lot of people have been sleeping on him, right? But John Moran is suspended as of right now for 25 games. So that's gonna be a good starter. Gordon Hayward, you know, I think he's at the end of his fantasy career, so I don't really like him there. So we need to figure out somebody to put in that spot. Porzingis, I got to see him live. I mean, he was the best Celtics. He was the best Celtic in their opening preseason game. I saw him do a couple dribble moves where he made a defender touch the floor, athletic dunk, a couple alley hoops, hit some threes, had a couple block shots. I think he's going to be really good, on the Celtics and have a pretty good regular season, especially if he can stay healthy. And I think the pairing with him and Sabonis, I mean, that's a match made in heaven. I mean, you're covering all the categories there, and Sabonis is like an elite rebounder and an assist playmaker. So that looks pretty good. And then you pair it with like the up and coming big of Mark Williams. Like he's probably going to have a big year now. He's got LaMelo Ball in Charlotte healthy. That pick and roll is going to be just, it's going to look so good, I think, this year. Um, but like, I mean, you look at the combination of all these guys, and I mean, this team feels pretty thin, right? Like they're one injury away from, basically being the end of the play-in, right? That kind of um 5 to 6 team in the conference. So if I had to put a score, I mean, oof, I'm probably gonna take the outcome of them finishing six, like just something just not going right between Porzingis, Sabonis, and Trey Jones. Like just something just not going right with this team. Yeah, that's the other thing. They don't really have a number like a first rounder. Um,
Sabonis. I mean, Sabonis is going at the end of the
that's
turn, at least
that's
maybe
true.
latest halfway through round two.
That's a good point.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
Yeah. No,
yeah,
I mean, the guy's big man situation's solid. I mean, all those guys.
yeah,
John Collins was a top 30 player a few years ago until Atlanta basically, snuffed his candle out. Um,
yeah.
I wonder if he returns to that in Utah with Markkanen and Kessler and Taylor Hendricks. Maybe not, but whatever, take the upswing. That's possible. Mark Williams looks like a young and up and coming stud. I mean, there's no reason why he doesn't start for Charlotte ahead of Nick Richards. Um, Sabonis is, he's a plotter, pretty consistent, not an injury prone guy. Top 24 player pretty comfortably. Maybe Porzingis this year plays more game. I mean, last year I think I might be mistaken here, but it was pretty up there as far as career year for fantasy and stat set and also games played. Maybe that's an anomaly, but maybe him playing with Brown and Tatum, he's a number 3 guy now. Maybe that lowers the stress on him. He plays less minutes and he can play more games. Um, yeah, I have this team at fifth, just ahead of me, and right after I think it's Bombers. Um, it's solid big guys. If anything, maybe an extra wing would be nice. Although he has Jaden McDaniels on the bench. And I agree with Cam. Trey Jones, I think, is going to be a very, very serviceable guard and have a very serviceable career. I don't see him as the starting future point guard for San Antonio, but he probably still getting like 6, 7 assists this year.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with everything you guys said. I'm the front line, the power positions are just hard to argue against what they've got going on there. But I do have a lot of questions around the guard and wing positions. What are you asking Bruce Brown to deliver you outside of just being a nice solid role player who can contribute to a lot of different categories, but will he produce the type of volume that you need at that position? I'm not sure. Trey Jones, I I would have loved if he would have got Ty instead. I thought he had a chance to do that a few times, getting kind of a lead guard, which I don't see on this roster. Look, Marcus Smart, I know we've got a lot of Celtic fans and a lot of believers in Marcus Smart. I tend not to be one of them. I but this has been a steady player for Solid State for years. So I hope he does well in Memphis. I really like the trade that Memphis did to bring him in. I think he can be a really be a leader for them and really kind of give them that probably a positive experience, especially after what Dylan Brooks brought to the table last year. I mean, he brings a similar dynamic, but in a better way. But he's a guy who I just like more in real life than in fantasy. And I think he's already hurt, if I'm not mistaken. So with him, Gordon Hayward, Kristaps, injury is going to be a little bit of concern. And then, what exactly you're going to get for them. Remember, Kristaps is also moving to a tertiary role now in Boston. He had a career year last year, and he kind of how I felt about Shea, I kind of feel about Kristaps. What he did last year, I'm not surprised. The biggest surprise was that he stayed healthy. So can he do that again? And what exactly will his situation be? I mean, the preseason is the preseason, but how Tatum and Jaylen Brown get. Like, when that ball gets moving, it can be, left to right, and they don't see anybody else. Even I know Tatum averages a lot of assists, but that's what it took Marcus Smart calling them out before they really changed that up. And so, are they gonna continue in that path of kind of sharing and moving that ball around, or are they gonna revert back to what they were in the past and get a little bit of ball dominant? But they've got a good team. They've got a few people that can move the ball around. So maybe Kristaps will be a key component to their offense. I mean, he's clearly very talented and can be that. But he's the third banana now. So you get what you get. So I agree with your positioning. I think the top half of this player chart is a little bit below where I think solid state standards have been in the past. Usually they have a guy like Harden, and that kind of helps move things along with Sabonis and everyone else they put around them. It's going to be a little bit tough this year, I think. So, moving on to the Rucker Park Busters. Now, we all know this manager very well. I think they're very excited for what they have in what he calls the Slim Towers. Tanked his way to getting Wemby last year. Not his finest or proudest moment, but one that we'll live with, and I'm sure he'll live with now that he got the grand prize of Wemby. But made some really good trades this offseason, brought in Luka, Booker, Jaylen Brown. I mean, this guy is loaded. I mean, they're loaded from top to bottom. It's just like there's no way around it. And I'm not talking about just for right now. Like this team can be a perpetual contender for the next like 4 years if he wants to be, and if he wants to
He
pay
doesn't
that money.
trade out of it.
If he
Yeah.
doesn't trade out, that's the other
And
part, right? This is the
he's
other team
certainly
that
gonna
can.
trade.
Yeah, this is if there's this is the other team that can flip their team in a heartbeat if they need to. So I don't see that coming. I think he's got a lot of players that he really likes. So I'm curious to see how sustainable the roster becomes. But these guys are all like you don't really see a lot of like question marks in terms of like health or anything like that. They struggled a little bit with health last year, and I think that's kind of what brought the team to sort of move in the other direction. But you know, you know what it is with Luca and Booker. And then, can Wemby and Chet, can their bodies hold up? That's a question a lot of people have. I think they can. I don't see any reason. I mean, they're young, but I think Vic is a professional. Chet, this is kind of just what he does. I think that guy, I just like everything about him. I like everything about Chet. Like what he brings as far as the mentality and the talent he has. It's grade A, man. I just like what they've got here. What do you guys think about the offseason and the projected lineup? Obviously, one of the teams that you've mentioned at the top, at least one or two. So, yeah, go ahead, Killa.
I mean, they've had like an A plus off season. They won the grand prize, as you pointed out. Dang. They're they're just stacked from 1 to 8. I mean, you're talking about two all NBA players in Luka Doncic and Devin Booker, and they're both super young and ascending, right? Like they're, arguably gonna be MVP candidates and the best players on their team. DeJounte Murray, I mean, he's kind of in a secondary role, thank goodness, but he's fills up the stat sheet. And Mikal Brooklyn Bridges, right? He's the best player on the Brooklyn Nets, right? He's that star player, right? So if you go throughout this roster, like, the Rucker Park Busters has a top 3 player from each of their respective NBA teams. Like, I mean, maybe you could stretch Chet, might not be the third best depending on who you prefer. But I mean, in the limited sample size, I mean, he looks like the third best player to me. I would certainly put him ahead of Giddy, probably certainly behind Shea. J Dub, that's kind of hard because I've seen it like in real games. And so maybe I'd have him slide right in the 3 spot safely. But Jaylen Brown is the second best player on his team. He's about to be the most paid player in the NBA. Victor's already the best player on his team, and he hasn't even played a regular season game. What is this fool's name? Damana Ayton.
Dominating,
Dominating.
Dominate, dominating.
dominating.
Um, he's in a great situation in Portland. Like it's like, he's been asking for that for a while, and I think he's gonna have, an excellent year. So I mean, just top to bottom, they've just got just a stellar roster. And they're just gonna be a tough out any week for any manager.
Yeah, I'll I'll echo a lot of that. This is the part where we just cut the show, and then Odin just goes like, "Wait, where's the rest of it?" This squad's top eight is by far and away the best in our division. If, like this team should be in the finals against Dane's team, really. Um, Given the history of the league, from what I've told, it's the top seeds don't often win. There's that would be really shocking this year. Um, it's annoying looking at the team, the fact that he got Victor Wembanyama as the number one pick, and then you're looking at all these guys. Like conceivably, he could have 5 to 6 top 24 players in redraft leagues within the next few years, conceivably, depending on how you feel about DeAndre Ayton in Portland and renewed
Mm-hmm.
still. But like Chet, Victor, Mikel, Devin, Luca, I mean, 3 of those guys are already going in the top 24. You add Victor and Chet in a year, 2 or 3, and maybe eight, and like it's crazy. It's crazy. Um, it's interesting too, the juxtaposition between how he's built this team and how Speedsters has built the team, where Odin has really almost consolidated moves. He's moved 2 or 3 pieces for that one star.
Mm-hmm.
And Speedsters has gone for a lot more depth. Maybe later on he'll consolidate for the top eight. But it's going to be really fun watching those two teams if they collide in the playoffs before going to the finals. I mean, all these. I mean, what else can you say? All these guys are on the upswing of their careers still, or in their prime. So yeah, there's tip your hat. I hate saying that about Odin's team, but he's done a really, really great job.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean it. I
So
mean
I
the
have an
only
odd question.
thing, the only thing that's good, I mean, is he's a luxury team now, right? So, if he wants to keep this particular band together, he'll at least be, continuing to fund the pot, right? So there's, that one advantage for the other 15 managers, right, that are seeking to come away with a championship.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
mean,
It's a really
yeah,
great
you're
point.
right. Yeah, when you think about it, I mean, I did mention that this team could, they're young, all young enough in age where you might want to keep them together for the next several years. But when you think about the money, will will it ever come to a point where we just saw speedsters, we saw all the players that they moved out this past year, could you have a similar situation like that maybe next year or maybe the year after for Rucker Park? So it's something to monitor, certainly, especially if we implement the second apron, um, salary apron next year. So now we're talking about uh, a second level tax that people really won't be super thrilled to jump into. So
That
that's one of the questions. Mhm.
that changes things considerably. I forgot about so what is it? It's 10%. It's 10% if you're in the top, whatever number. Like,
Yeah, if you're over the soft cap, it's 10%. Every dollar over the soft cap. If you go over the second apron, I believe the proposed plan right now that we'll vote on this season is, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's 50 cents on the dollar.
right.
mhm.
And there's something with rank too, right? Like if you
Oh,
finish,
the inflation, the player
yeah.
inflations.
Because
So
if
the
all
Yep.
these
play,
guys are in their prime, that's a big inflation bill potentially next year. So conceivably, he won't have this team next year, I mean, unless he's willing
yeah,
to foot a large bill.
Yeah,
yeah,
if
because
he if
like
he wants to pay, yeah, he can
Yeah.
keep him if he wants to pay.
Because, like, here's an example. Imagine if six of his players, six is probably too high, but five of his players finished top 10, right? That's like a dream season, right? That's like 10%. And so that's 10% of the cap multiplied by five. So that's 50%. So 50% of like 350, that's like $175, which is like at least $17 of inflation, not considering everybody else that he's got to keep. And wherever he was at, right? Because he was already a luxury team too, and it compounds. So, I mean, there's got to be a lot of maneuvering by his finance team to kind of make this work.
Right.
But you bet if he's popping champagne, he's probably gonna run that back.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
yeah.
I agree.